My grandmother read her horoscope and talked to the conjure woman to make the right tea to solve a problem. Some of my friends find peace in yoga and Buddhist meditation. Other Black folk gather crystals, turn tarot cards, and set up ancestral altars, and go to church every Sunday. Or maybe they don't, because churches condemn their practices, but they have no problem with Jesus.
Wade in the water. Wade in the water, children. Wade in the water. God's gonna trouble the water.
Welcome to Diverse Devotions, Black Belief Across Boundaries, where we wade into the waters of religious multiplicity, Black faith, and spiritual journeys. Discover what happens when Black spirituality breaks the rules of how being religious is supposed to work. I'm Monica A. Coleman, writer, university professor, ordained clergy person, and initiated Iyala Orisha. In Diverse Devotions, I'll lead you through a tapestry of captivating narratives and thought-provoking dialogues. We'll hear the spiritual journeys of Black folk who practice more than one religion. We'll also hear from individuals whose acceptance of different religions emanates from an understanding of laws of nature and universal spiritual principles. From the freedom of religious multiplicity to the personal journeys of transformation, each episode offers enlightening perspectives that expand the boundaries of Black belief. So, if you're a seeker hungry for knowledge, religiously devout, an educator curious to understand, or simply intrigued by spirituality's rich diversity, follow and like Diverse Devotions. Be a part of this journey, because at the heart of these stories, you'll find the spirit of freedom. I am excited to welcome to the podcast Charline Manuel. She is an inspirational author, speaker, board consultant, and unity minister of 30 years. In her work, she's encouraged small and large audiences nationally and internationally through her writings, keynote messages, workshops, seminars, and retreats. Charline Manuel has been active in international initiatives bringing water to villages in Africa, building a school in Haiti, and peace immersion in Costa Rica. She served as a church pastor for 22 years before moving into training church leaders and their boards to be more effective leaders. Charline served on the board of directors of Unity World Headquarters and was the first person of color to serve as chair of the board in the organization's 130-year history. She currently serves as chair of the Board of Trustees of the Parliament of World Religions, headquartered in Chicago, Illinois. She's a faculty instructor of the Unity Urban Ministerial School, helping to develop spiritual leaders for ministry since 2012. And Charline Manuel is the author of 9 books, including titles Pray Up Your Life and the Metaphysics of Shoes, Boardroom Culture Shock, The Power of One Accord, 7 Keys to Harnessing Synergy in the Boardroom. However, if you ask her of all her books which is closest to her heart, she will tell you her children's book, Do Puppies Pray, written with her 2 grandchildren in mind. She's a proud mother and grandmother, making her home just outside of Orlando, Florida. Thank you so much for joining us on the podcast.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be with you today.
And I just feel like we've got so much like royalty in the room, Unity royalty. And I'm so excited you're taking some time to chat with us. And one of the first things I want to ask you is for you to tell us about your spiritual or religious identification and how you got there. Like, were you raised Unity? Tell us something about how you think of yourself religiously, and then maybe a bit about your journey there.
Yeah, that's one of the things I talk a lot about. My latest book wasn't listed in there, but my latest book is titled Shaping Hope. And I talk a lot about my spiritual journey and how I arrived at a place of being hopeful, optimistic, and just forward thinking in terms of how I live my life, even in the midst of seeming chaos all around us. No, I wasn't raised Unity, and I guess probably as a child, we went to a traditional religious church. I won't call out the religious tradition because I don't want to make anybody feel bad about that, but it was traditional religion. And as a child, I would sit there and I just didn't believe what I was hearing. So my take on that is I brought from a previous life a different belief system. And so sitting there, all I could think is, I don't believe this stuff. And then even in Sunday school, I would ask so many questions that my Sunday school teacher talked to my mom and said, could you ask her to just sit there and listen and stop asking so many questions? And I'm like, well, what's the point of going to Sunday school if you can't ask questions?
Right.
So I had a difficult time as a child in the religion where I was raised. And what that did for me is kind of, I set out into the world to live my life without any real religious foundation or belief system that life could be good, that life could be grand, that life should be uh, fun, that life should be productive, that life could be something that I could actually enjoy. I set out on a journey. So as a teenage girl, I set out on this journey, and I didn't have a grounding in a belief system that life could be good.
Mm.
And that's a very dangerous place to be. And after getting myself in the most unimaginable, challenging, and dangerous life experiences, I found myself at a place that said, wait a minute, if I am going to even survive, there's got to be something more. And I had to seek that out. And I started out on this journey to really find something that would at least give me the hint that the way I was thinking about life, the way I was living life, that there was more to that, and it was meant to be more than that. So that incredible search just took me on a journey, and I'm a natural learner. So I just, started studying and learning and trying my best to figure it out and give meaning to my life, give purpose to my life. And that journey served me well. And it took me to a Unity church in Detroit where I grew up. And just, just kind of taking teaspoons of this new thought, belief, and understanding, and of the Unity principles, just so many years just guided me to this place. And then as my life started to get better, I thought, okay, there's something to this. I should just keep going. I should seek to know more, do more, be more, and get more out of life down this path. And so for me, what Unity is, and it's really Unity's tagline. And I was speaking to one of my colleagues this past weekend, and he said, yeah, but that doesn't really say anything. And I'm like, to me, it says everything. For me, Unity is this path for spiritual living. It shows me how to live a spiritual life. Mm-hmm. And what I have found is, as I am always seeking to live a spiritual life, my life is betterer and gooder than ever. And the moment I kind of deviate a little bit from that path, I can feel it, I can sense it, and I go, oops, off track, get back on that path to just living a spiritual life. And as long as you do that, Charline, you're good. And if you can grab a few hands along the way of people who might want to do this, great. And that's what I seek to do in my ministerial work and in the writing of the books that I have written. Is like, hey, there's this way, and if this is a way that works for you, here's a path to follow.
Well, thank you so much for sharing about that. Now, I don't want to assume that our listeners know much about unity. So, can you tell us something? Can you give us like the breakdown of unity? Is it like a certain kind of church, would you say? Or no? Like, tell us something about unity for those who might only be familiar with like traditional denominational religion.
Yeah, and unity. There are unity churches. Yes, and we fall under the maybe the belief system or thinking of what is broadly called New Thought. And in other words, what unity does, and New Thought as well, is look at the teachings of other religious teachings and take from it what we think is the best, and specifically around the Bible, look at it metaphysically than just as a literal book that is written by the word of God. Now, that gets us in trouble with a lot of religious, particularly a lot of Christian denominations. That gets us into trouble because we don't take the literal view of the Bible, but say, take a metaphysical approach that says, if I'm hearing this story that's in the Bible, rather than focus on the life of the characters in that story, what's the meaning behind the story, and take that meaning behind the story and say, how does that apply to my life? What does that mean for me? What can that do to help me live a more enlightened, uplifting, and even positive um, um, life? So Unity's core teachings are that, there's one presence, there's one power, it's God, and God is absolute good. So one of the things that Unity takes away from people, that from the tradition where I grew up, it takes away your devil. You don't get to have a devil and blame everything on the devil. Now, there are some people in the world acting devilish, yes. Gotta say that.
Right.
But the idea is that there is a supreme universal goodness that is at the core and the creation of everything, and it's good and it's meant to be good. Human beings, we don't always, because we don't recognize that, we do bad things, but the intent behind our even being created is for good. We believe in the power of prayer, and the power of prayer and focusing our mind power. So prayer, meditation, the power of thought, the power of our words. That we have the opportunity to use those in our life to create the kind of life that we would desire. And you have to work at it. And then lastly, I will just say, add to that is to be in action about, first of all, taking responsibility for our own lives. If we take responsibility for our own lives, then to be in action toward living a life that works for our health, happiness, growth, success, prosperity, and also be in action to have that be something that everybody can share in. So that's a kind of little brief thingy there.
Oh no, that is great. I so appreciate it. So, where do you see yourself within Unity? Like, is there a name? Would you say I'm a Unity minister? Like, how would you, if you were to define? I know people don't in their heads usually define themselves spiritually, but if you were to, like, how would
Yeah, so
you name
yeah,
yourself?
I'm a Unity minister. I went to our seminary. Our seminary is located in well, we have a couple seminary tracks, but our main headquarters is in Lee Summit, Missouri. And I went through the ministerial program. Back then it was a 2-year program, and I went through that and was licensed and ordained by our, Unity leadership. And I continue to teach in one of the seminary tracks. other candidates who are coming through the ministerial program. So yes, I'm a unity minister, and because I'm not in a church per se, I'm in a lot of churches, because I go to different churches to work with their boards and their leaders. That's what I do, as my work. But then I also serve on, well, now I'm currently serving as chair of the board of the Parliament of the World's Religions. And so I am there so that the unity teachings, the New Thought teachings, are part of the total framework from which we operate as an organization to make a difference in the world, just plain and simple, just to make a difference in the world so that we can say that we live in a fair, just, equitable, sustainable society where life is valued and all life is valued and appreciated and respected and honored. And that's at the core of what I think, for me, my life is about. It's like, I really want to see there, to be able to travel anywhere in the world, anywhere. This is such a beautiful planet, to be able to travel anywhere in the world and not only feel fairly treated, but then treat others the way I would like to be treated no matter where I go. And I want the same thing for my two grandsons. I would love them to just be able to travel the world, and I wouldn't have to worry about them, because everybody in the world understands our interconnectedness, that we're really all in this together, and treat each other that way.
Yeah. Well, I've got to ask you about the Parliament. So our listeners know this is where I met you, but mind you, not that you remember meeting me, you're the superstar. And, your daughter and I have a friend in common, and she's like, oh, that's my mom. And she's running around doing important things. And I want you to share a little bit with us about the Parliament, but also when people think of world religions, if you're a freshman in college somewhere taking World Religions 101, they're usually naming 5, if you're lucky, 10, but unity is usually not one of them. So can you tell us a little bit about where unity fits in world religions, and about the Parliament, and how now, wait, I'll say one of the people in charge, one of the superstars, is a unity person, right? We hear about Christianity, Islam, Buddhism, Hinduism, right? We hear about certain religions, but this is not one that your average intro to religion course is teaching. Well, it should be, but it isn't usually. So will you tell us a little bit about this?
Well, and that's such a very good question. And I like the way that you set that up, because it's right. You're absolutely right. You don't hear a lot about unity or New Thought. So then how did you get to be like the chair of organization in your, yeah, because of my willingness to take that step and say, we're here, we're important, and we need a seat at the table. That's number one. So I will say that New Thought is just beginning to be recognized by the Parliament in the last maybe, I don't want to say it's 2004. And that's part of the work of the Parliament too, to recognize the diversity of religions and religious beliefs and religious thought. One of the things I will say, the fastest growing attendees at our convenings that we have are people who classify themselves as spiritual, not religious. And so that gives a lot of room for different types of beliefs to come in to the conversation, not religious, but very spiritual. So even though the name says Parliament of the World's Religions, it's more about our thought toward and our willingness to be open and receptive, so that all religions and spiritual thought can sit at the same table and say, what have we in common and how can we really make the world a better place? So that's one thing. So the parliament actually had its genesis in 1893. There was in Chicago actually a group of religious leaders that said, let's just have a conversation about how we can join together as religious leaders, and maybe we can figure something out about how we can relate, work together to make the world a better place, like that. So that happened in 1893. It was a wonderful event, but people say that was actually the birth of the interfaith movement with that event. It was 100 years later before a group like that convened again. And then that was in 1993. Again, they held that one in Chicago and said, we need to meet more often. And so that really kind of started different convenings, what we call convenings. Just bring everybody together who wants to be a part of making a difference in the world, and they have a religious or belief system that can contribute to, how we can, make the world a better place. I'll just say that. So it was Chicago, and then South Africa. The next one was in South Africa with great speakers along the way in that one, which I missed in 1999, where Nelson Mandela was one of the keynote speakers. And then we had the Dalai Lama in Australia. So, traveling different places, usually every 3 to 5 years, there's a parliament. And because it is a global organization, to have it move, not just centered in the United States, but to move in around different places. So I've been to Barcelona, Australia, we did Salt Lake. Oh, then we had Toronto in 2018. So, and we're not sure where the next one will be as of yet, but that's what we do, bringing people together. And I have to say, I would be interested to hear if that was your sense of what you experienced at a convening where there is anywhere from 8,000 to 10,000 people from all over the world, from every different religious thought and belief, even religious belief systems where you don't really know their name, but they're there with the heart for being in an interfaith, diverse, culturally, socially diverse group of people, and saying, hey, I can learn more about you, willing to let you learn more about me. Don't want to convert anybody, but how can we find common ground and then work together to just, live peacefully on this planet and actually take care of the planet as well. So that sense, for me, the convenings feel like what I think of diversity on steroids. That's what I think of it as. It's like, oh my God, and just to be in that energy for me is just electric. So, but I'd love to hear what your sense was about that. Yeah, I don't know if I'm gonna do that now,
Yeah,
but
it was.
I'd love to know.
Yeah, it's a lot of, it sounds woo-woo, but a lot of positive energy, right? Everyone's like in a good mood. Everyone is very open about sharing about their traditions and learning about other traditions. So it's very peaceful. We were chatting before the recording. The food is great. Um, there's lots of arts involved, right? I mean, at least I went to a number of things that, they had the sessions, and they had sessions outside where you could make art and do different things. Like it was a very good vibe, I would say. And there were some parts that were, more intellectually stimulating, like kind of more academic and panels, which is kind of where I live. And then there were other parts that were not, right? That were very engaged, very embodied, very like, let's try this out together, kind of exercises. And I had a good time. Generally, it was, I mean, it felt like it was really fun. And I mean, the worst part is that there's just more than you can do. There's so many things happening at the same time. You have to make hard decisions about where to go. But other than that, which, you know, and I ran into friends I didn't even know would be there. So, like, I didn't know Tanisha would be there. I saw her there, who we've had on the podcast. And, you know, I had a great time. And I was just happy it was stateside because I had wanted to
Yeah.
go. But, you know, pulling up those funds to get internationally, particularly when I had a young child, was a whole different thing. So I was like, oh, great, I can go. And so I really enjoyed it. And I would definitely say that the way you described it is how I experienced it.
Yeah, it's always interesting to hear somebody else's perspective. And that's the idea, is like what you take away from that, this sense of, at least for me, what I took away from the first parliament that I attended, which was back in 2004, and we'd gone to Barcelona. And what I took away from that, what I walked away feeling like, peace on earth is really possible. Because I was in a room of 10,000 people that I certainly didn't know by name, couldn't speak all of the different languages that were being spoken. We all had our own cultural attire, whatever that is, sexual orientation. None of that really mattered. We were all just in this room with all our differences. And it was a great joy to be in that energy. And it's like, so it really is possible, for what I take away from that, to have peace on earth with all our differences.
Yeah.
You know, it really is possible, because I feel like I experienced it there. It's just that we got to get it out there more and more and more and more and more,
Yeah.
until it catches fire and people really get that, you know, there's really nothing for us to experience with each other but pure joy. And taking an interest in how people live and believe, without judgment,
Yeah.
and without the need to fix or be right or have somebody else be wrong.
Yeah.
Just a different perspective. And that doesn't prevent us from being able to sit and have a meal together and laugh and find common ground on things that really do matter.
Exactly. It was a really beautiful space. Now, I want to ask you a little bit more about something you said when you were talking about unity, right? Because you said, well, there's some unity churches. And the word that comes to my mind when I hear unity, for some reason, is unity fellowship, right? So, and I'm not sure why. Maybe I'm pulling that from somewhere else. But does that mean all unity places are churches that just read the Bible metaphysically, or are you kind of like maybe Unitarian Universalists who hold together multiple beliefs within one overarching rubric? And tell us about Jesus, right? So, what do y'all think about Jesus? Tell us. I'd like to hear.
We like him. We like Jesus. Jesus is cool. Yeah, so we think of Jesus as what we would say is our teacher, elder brother, the way shower, the one whose life was to show us a way to find the Christ within ourselves. So it's not enough to say, well, Jesus is the Christ and he's wonderful, he's great, you know, pray to Jesus and everything is good. That's all well and good, but we take that a step further and say, but Jesus pointed the way to say, and he actually said that the things that I do, you can do also. So rather than to keep focusing on Jesus, 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 and what Jesus did, once we understand what Jesus did, then bring it back to ourselves and say, okay, now that Jesus has shown me the way, how do I live that? How do I exemplify those teachings? You know, if Jesus said we should love one another, okay, that's good. That's Jesus saying it. But Charlene has got to be able to say, hey, I've got to follow that. I've got to live that.
Mhm.
I've got to live. I've got to say, I love, you know, not just pick and choose the people that, you know, the people that I like, but but to live in such a way that my life reflects what Jesus taught. And that's the work from, you know, that we would be speaking of.
I mean, that is right. That's the hard part.
That's the hard part. You know, and some people stop short of that. It's like, well, Jesus said this, Jesus said this. Okay, Jesus said that, but what are you doing with it? How are you living what Jesus said? How are you saying it now? And then they're like, whoa, well, wait a minute. I just want to talk about what Jesus did. Well, that's good, what Jesus did. We like it. And so, yes, at a Unity church, you would find, you know, just like what people probably experience at a lot of other maybe traditional church services, you know, because there's prayer and meditation, and there's, you know, a message with a minister doing a sermon, or sometimes we call them a lesson or a talk. There's music, certainly got to take an offering. And then after that service, people coming together in community over coffee and tea, or, you know, a chance to have a community connection together. And depending on the church, maybe they're involved in, you know, social and cultural activities within their own community, and issues that we all face in the world, how our involvement is in that. One of the things that Unity has is a wonderful booklet called The Daily Word. And I keep mine on my phone, so my hard copy I keep in the kitchen. A booklet called The Daily Word, and it's an inspirational message for each day. And that book has been published
Like
every day for 100 years. We celebrate 100 years last year. So it's a little booklet that comes out monthly. Actually, it sends it out, so there's two months within a booklet. But there's a daily message, again, with the idea of keeping our thoughts, keeping our words at a high level, because we know that's the life we want to live. And you know, we look at that as, you have to take charge of your mind. If you don't, you could easily look at the news and see all the things that are going on and get absolutely depressed. Yeah. And angry and worried and fearful. And that's one way to live. And this is saying you have a choice. You can be aware of what's going on in the world, but you don't have to carry the fear and the anger. But you got to do that by keeping your thoughts high, keeping your conversation on a hopeful and positive, optimistic, and understanding that underneath that is not just airy fairy, oh, I'm thinking positive thoughts, but there's underneath that, there is a genuine grounding in whatever is your belief around God or the divine or our creator. What is your core belief about God? What is your core belief? So one of my core beliefs is, and I had that from a child that I can recognize, I absolutely believed as a child that God created me for joy. I absolutely believed, as a kid, I would just say, I'm like, I don't think a God would create me and that I couldn't be here and have fun and have good friends and have a good life. I didn't know how to do that, but I felt like I just don't think a God would create me and then have me here to suffer. Those two things just didn't connect in my mind as a child. And that continues to be, I think, if I were a God and I was creating a world, I would want a world where everybody could be happy. I'm like, yeah, that's what I believe in. That's what I choose to believe in. That's what I go for.
Well, I had a question, but now I have more questions. First of all, the daily word. My Baptist grandmothers loved the daily word,
Oh,
right? I mean, keep it right by their bedside. And probably had no sense that it was unity at all. But we're reading that
uh-huh.
daily word and reading it to me over our oatmeal breakfasts, you know. So I'm like, oh, I didn't know that was a unity publication. Um, so
Yes.
very cool to know. Um, oh, something you said I wanted to ask you, say more about, and that is, you know, in some ways it feels like a very radical and maybe even challenging idea to say that the world is good, right? And that God, we get that God is good, right? Most people want a good God, but to say the world is good and we're created good and we're created for joy can be very countercultural when not only is the news full of like doomsday, but even as, at least for me, as a Black person, I was kind of raised like the world is against you, right?
Right.
You're,
Yeah.
we're putting you out into this harsh world, and you might be good, but the world is not. And so I'd
Yeah.
love to hear you say more about that, particularly as, an African American, and how you come to that, given all the things that we've experienced historically
Yeah. Yeah. And
and
that makes a
currently.
lot of sense. And currently,
Yeah,
can't forget
right. I mean,
currently.
I like it's just history and currently.
So in the grand scheme, in the universal, in the divine, in the infinite, that is the I want to say the consciousness that is that our creator created as good. Now, the world in which we live in, there is a distinction between what God has made and what humankind has made. So, God did not make guns. Okay. God did not say, oh, I think I'll make a bunch of guns and give them to human beings so they can shoot each other. So the world that we live in is not living to the standard to which we were created. And guns were created from our worldly um, expression of who we are. So the life that we get to live as a part of this world is how humankind has maybe, I would say, not lived up to the highest that we were created to be, and have created our own subset of how we want to do things. And the work for all of us is to remember how we were created for good and not fall into the human, um, purely human way of living out of greed and envy and a hunger for power, which those things cause all of us problems in the world. So Jesus, remember, speaking of Jesus, so in the scripture where Jesus said, be of good cheer, I have overcome the world. That scripture, you that. So that's exactly it. He's like, be of good cheer. How you were created was for good. And to overcome the world is to not get caught up in, okay, so we've made a gun or we've made nuclear weapons. Ooh, well, let's do something with that. That's getting caught up in the world. And then our work is always to strive to live how we live from the consciousness that we were created to live, which is joy and love and kindness and compassion and that, not fear, anger, worry. So there is definitely a disconnect, between how we're living in the world and how we were created to be. And that's the difference. And so what I'm saying is, even though I'm living in the world, I'm constantly striving to live from where I was created to live. And though I still have to navigate the world, I'm still striving to live from that higher place. And the more I do that, the better I can actually navigate the world. Because I've learned this. If what I'm seeing in the world is evil and anger and fear and just plain meanness, as if I lean into that from my personal perspective, I don't feel good. I don't like myself. I don't. So even though I've got to see that in the world, I've got to say, well, Charline, that's what's happening in the world, but that does not have to reflect the reality of how I see myself. I'm a kind person. And even in the midst of a group of people around me being unkind, I don't have to be unkind just because they are, because I won't feel good about myself if I do that. Make sense?
It does, and that's such a good concrete example. I find that really helpful. I play this back to my kid who's been mad that I've never let them play with guns, water guns or anything. I'm like, see, it's not just me. Um, I'd love to ask you a bit about when you bring these beliefs, which I still think are kind of countercultural. Like this is not where most people are. Um, what, do you get pushback, right? Like, did your family all say, "We see the light with you. We're going to join Unity too," or did they stay in the church that you grew up in, or do you get kind of pushback about? Like you mentioned a little bit, like some Christians don't like when we're metaphysical about this, but do you get pushback, or do people go, "Oh yeah, I see. Tell me more," or both?
A little bit of both. There are some family members who are just totally just like, they just think I'm lost because they are very, very steep in a traditional religious belief system. And they say that works for them. And great. So I'm not at the Thanksgiving dinner to change that about you. I'm just not going to live by what your um, your particular belief system is, and don't expect you to live in mine. But what I do expect and always strive for is that we respect each other's right to choose. So if that's what you choose and that works for you, who am I? I'm working on me and this, what I'm going for. So yeah, there's pushback. And then I've got a whole subset of family who's like, listen, we grew up in that religion, don't believe that, really don't want to do the work to get into what you're talking about. I'll just be right here in the middle, and I'll say a prayer. If I ever get in trouble, I'll just say, oh, please God help me. And usually that works. When you get in trouble, you're like, oh, please God help me, please, 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 please. And so they're like, if I can just get away with that, I'm good, and bless the Thanksgiving dinner and let's all eat. You know what I mean? So absolutely, it is. It's not an easy place to be in that sense, but I've made my peace with it. I've made my peace with the very idea is that I can't force somebody else's belief system. I can't craft somebody else's journey. I think this life, you got to there's just certain amount of things you just got to do for yourself. You got to figure out the best path for you to follow and follow it to the best of your understanding. Now, if you want some support or help or ideas, and I'm here, but I can't force my belief system on someone else. And a lot of times I don't really understand how people still believe that. I'll give you an example. A young woman that I met many years ago, and she was in an abusive marriage, and her husband would actually beat her. And so when I talked to her, I was like, sweetie, there's a better way to live. I mean, maybe get him some help. I mean, if you just feel like you love him so much you cannot leave him, at least, talk to somebody so he can get some help. And you need to get help because you are not created to be a punching bag for somebody who says they love you. That may be love in their mind, but that's not the way that you want to experience love. And so she went to they were church going folk. She went to the pastor of the church, and the pastor told her in a counseling session that she just needed to pray for him and recognize that he's the man of the house. Mm-hmm. And she should, work more on just being subservient and doing what her husband told her to do, because that's in the Bible, that she should be subservient to her husband. And just pray for him. And then make sure you have his dinner ready on time. And that's what he told her. And I'm like, see, I couldn't go to a church like that. That ain't me. That's not something I could eat. That scares me right there. Like, no, get away from me. So the interesting thing, she stayed in that marriage, I think, till he almost killed her. And finally, she did leave him, but he even stalked her like for years and years after that marriage. But she still went to that church, and I do not understand that. So people have their own journey that they walk, and until that something within them gets to a place where they get that they need to change or do something different or see things a different way, that part of that has got to be internal. Now that woman, she stayed in that church, and eventually she did meet another man in that church and married him, and they've been married now a couple of years, and they seem to be happy. So that's good. So she, did make some progress, but I just couldn't fathom going to a pastor and saying, I'm being physically abused by my husband, and the response is just pray for him and do what he tells you to do, and you'll be fine. I don't get that.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. I mean, the example you use, you don't know that a good part of my career I spent working with sexual and domestic violence programs as an advocate, and in some as a survivor advocate. And so I'm so with you in this example, and having lived in the buckle of the Bible Belt, heard so many stories like this. And it brings me to kind of the next, I'm going to put two questions together, even though they're only a little related. And, for those who choose to stay in churches, right, even those who want to reform from within, you say, well, all right, we would say, oh, well, that's not what God wants, right? This is the patriarchy, right? Kind of coming through. No, I'm with you. I will leave a church, right? I'll be like, no, we're not going to do this today or ever in the future, right? And I've written about that as well in some of my work, like, and then that was the last day I went there, right? And so, but I would like you to reflect, I guess, on two things for us. One is about patriarchy, because I've noticed that there are all these women in leadership in Unity, and no one seems to be losing sleep about this or thinking this is a huge deal. And I mean, you are a woman in leadership, so I'd love for you to talk a little bit about that. And then the second thing I'd like to talk about is about being Black in Unity, right? Because if I know correctly, Unity is not like a historically Black tradition, right? So I'd like to hear a little bit about your experience of Blackness, particularly around, I don't know, the things that come with Blackness, Black culture, right? Worship or music or the struggle for freedom. Like, please share a bit about these two. I know those are two big things, but I want to know.
Okay, yeah, excellent. One of the things that, at least according to the Unity teachings, and as I understood them early, is that that there is what we say is that spark of divinity is within all of us. That spark of divinity is within all of us. And it's up to us to allow that spark to take hold and grow. It doesn't say that that spark is only in the male body structure. It doesn't say that spark is only in people who are straight. It doesn't. So there is a kind of equality, and I think that's one of the things that has attracted. We have a lot of female ministers and a lot of ministers who are trans, gay, LGBTQ, because unity truly says not only everybody is welcome, but underneath that, the teaching is that spark of divinity is within all of us. So what that means is from the teaching, it means that, we can't live in this patriarchal movement and say, well, women aren't really qualified, in the Bible, where Paul said, let the women be silent in the church, and I've often said, if you let the women be silent in the church, it really, really, really wouldn't be a church without women. Even in the patriarchal churches, the women are still behind the scenes, making sure things happen and get done. So totally. That's crazy right there. But I think that's one of the things that really has attracted so many women, because we wanted to serve, be of service to God or our belief system, our creator, or felt the need to serve in a spiritual way, but we were not allowed in certain other religious traditions. And so we found our way to unity and to the new thought belief, and we were welcome there and said, yeah, not only can you serve, you can serve at the highest level here, because that spark of divinity is within you. And if you've unlocked that, come on, let's do it. That's what we're all here for. So that's one part of it. In terms of being a Black person in unity and New Thought in general, there was a time when Black people were not welcome in unity in the way that we should have been. And it was part and parcel a reflection of the times in which we lived. And unity actually had to work through that. Unity had to work through it, because people had to bring us back to our teachings. If there's that spark of divinity in all of us, if we were all created from good, for good, to be good and live the highest and best life, how are you saying, well, this segment of people don't belong to that? And that's counter to what you're teaching there. So we have had our struggles in unity, and I've been a part of that, making sure that we're conscious in those areas where there was, and I'll say probably a lot of unconscious bias, probably a lot that was unconscious as well as conscious. And as a unity leader, I will say that I was because they wrote about this when they wrote an article about me serving on the board of the Unity World Headquarters, and I was a big part of helping them shift from many of the systemic things within our movement that were just, racist, period. There's no other way to say it but to call it what it is. And I was very much a part of pointing that out.
Oh, good.
And what that yielded was I eventually became the chair of the board that I had served on for 8 years, fighting for that new raised level of equality for Black people in unity. So it was a work, but I felt like it's all part of the journey. You know what I mean? It's all part of the journey. And we can't stop and say, well, this is the way it is. This is the way it's always been. We take a breath and we say, we turn within. And this is what I do. And I always just, turn within and I ask for that inner wisdom to guide me where I can best be of service, to make a difference in the world. And I'm open to that. And then I let it happen. There's a affirmation that I keep here in front of my computer, and I try not to forget it, but it's right there for me to see every day. And it says, God has an idea that is just right for me. And that was a quote from Johnny Coleman, who was a pioneer in unity and New Thought. And she had to do groundbreaking things regarding race and unity. And that's a quote that I just keep there, it reminds me of that. God has a great idea that's just right for me. And so I asked for that idea. I turn within, I say, okay, what's the big idea? We got a big idea. Let me know what it is. And I'm there. I'm the girl. If it's for me, I'm the one. Just put me in front of the right people at the right time in the right place, and I'll give it my best shot. So tackling racism and unity was one of the, I guess, divine assignments that I was given, because I did actually do that work. But it wasn't from my ego, and it wasn't from trying to even tackle racism. That really isn't what I was trying to do, except when I ended up in the room and I got it, I was like, okay, I'm the only Black person sitting here. Yeah, that's an assignment, dear.
I'm just.
No, and it continues. See, and culturally, it continues.
Mm-hmm.
We make changes, we take steps, we get a couple of baby steps, we change a couple things, and we're talking about systemic racism. So, a couple things change, and a couple things change. But it takes time to really change the minds of men. And I'll say men because our society is very heavily skewed toward patriarchy. So we know that. So it takes work, and it takes patience, but it takes us not giving up either. It just takes to do the work.
So you found a home here, and yet, right, in some ways the struggle continues, or again, we talk about reforming from within, right? You would say.
Yeah, absolutely. It's easy to try to, stand on the outside and look in and say, oh, I know what they need to do. Mm-hmm. This, and this, and this. But my thing is, I'd rather have a seat at the table and then try to figure it out from there. Yeah. Because having a seat at the table, that's really where you get to learn where the pressure points are.
For sure.
That need to be persuaded, or shifted or changed or influenced, or just being present, sometimes just being willing to be present, even in an uncomfortable situation, that says, say what you want to say, but I'm here. I'm here. And you can think what you want to think, but still, I'm here. And that's, even that little bitty thing, just being present can be just a baby step toward making a shift and a change that needs to happen.
Yeah. And from where I sit on the outside, I see this, right? Now, it could just be because of who I know, right? So I only know the Black Unity people, but um, I see so much leadership even, in there. I guess I have just a couple more questions. And
Okay.
one is, all right, so we know that Black people are numerically, we'll say, a minority among Unity people, and there's still work being done there. So when you're amongst other Black people, do you feel like a religious minority there, or like they just, like I'm just welcoming you to the light, like, what do you, how's your faith position you, would you say, when you're around other Black communities?
Um, because how I feel and sense and see myself, I am really not here, when I say here, to really, I mean, I do have a definite spiritual path that I follow, and it works for me. It's what I believe in, and I'm willing to talk about it to anybody who's open, anybody who's interested. That is that. But I feel like my 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 spirituality, my religion is my life. It's how I live. So if I am in a room of people, no matter what their religious thought is about me, my perspective is I live my spirituality. It's my life. And so my work is to be kind and compassionate, to be open, and how that, if they want to say, oh, that's because of your religion and you want to put it that way, that's fine. But for me, this is my life. This is the life that I'm living. And so I can still relate to people if they don't have the same belief systems I have around Jesus, or around reincarnation, or around positive influence, around prayer, around meditation. I can still be in a room with people who don't believe in any of that, because I'm living my spirituality. And that may attract people when they don't even know it. Because think about it, you would much rather be in a room with someone who is kind, not because they're kind, because they want to network with you and get your business card, or maybe you can do business with them at a later date. And so they know how to give you a firm handshake and, all the businessy stuff that you're supposed to get, like that. So like, hey, that was pretty cool. But someone who is just generally kind because that's who they are.
Yeah.
And then maybe if you get some business out of that, that's great. Mm-hmm. But that's not why I'm being kind to you. Right. That's not why I'm being considerate to you. That's not why I'm being compassionate. That's not why I'm being a good listener to you. I'm doing that because that's part of my spiritual path, and that's how I live. So when I say that, to me, that makes me fit in just about anywhere. It really does.
Because who doesn't want to be
really
around
does.
kindness, right? Yeah.
And then when I express my joy, and sometimes my joy gets to be a little bit too much for people, because they're like, why are you always so happy? I'm like, I'll work at it. How I try to live. And I got to tell you a big secret. It feels really good. And it's not a show for you. It's like, this is how I maintain a level of thinking that allows me to live in the world and not be of it. So live in the world where the news is negative, a lot of fear talk, a lot of anger is surfacing, a lot of complaints. So I can hear those complaints, and I can even experience some of that. But I know that my center is, okay, that's what's happening. And I can allow that to consume me until I don't feel good about my life. Or I can say, okay, I can still feel my joy, and there's work to be done. And I'm going to do what I consider to be my part in this work, where it's, difficult. I can do that work, but my centering is my kindness, my compassion, my joy brings me to the place that I can actually do hard work, holding this joy, holding this kindness, holding this compassion. And it makes me able to do this work. One of the things that I have discovered, particularly I know a lot of people who work in the social justice arena and DEI areas of focus, and they are going through such a rough time now, and it's difficult because their life's work in many cases is just snatched from them, and they're trying to figure out what to do, what's next, and all of that. And there is this incredible need. Yes, we've got to figure this out, but the worst thing you can do when you're in that situation is get depressed. The worst place to try to figure out a positive strategy for a difficult situation is from a depressed person.
Yeah.
So we've got to be able to find, and this is what my book Shaping Hope is about. The subtitle of that is called Harnessing the Power of Grace in Your Life Stories. So to hold on to the grace in your life, hold on to that, and still face the difficult situations and tough things that you're working through. But hold on to that grace that says, out of the blue, maybe when I least expected, a blessing will turn up, something will happen that, will help me to get through this, or around it, over it. Somebody will call, some message will come, something will happen to help me get through this. And holding on to that, then if I can face the challenging situation that I'm going through, I can make better decisions and choices versus trying to solve deep, life-changing challenges and traumatic experiences from a place of defeat and hopelessness.
I mean, you're making this path sound very attractive. So if if there are other people who are like, I need to know more, where would you tell someone to start if this is the first they're hearing about this? Both the belief systems, this path, right? This kind of spiritual life and disposition, I would say. Where would you tell them to start?
Oh, okay. So start with them, but I would say really start with either finding a unity center near where you live, and sometimes that's not always, and not just a unity center. You can find a new thought center, Centers for Spiritual Living. Certainly there's Agape, UFBL, Universal Foundation for Better Living. Any of those churches and centers that teach the kind of things that we're talking about here. And short of that, find reading material and just start, just a little brief study into this way of thinking. That would be another thing. You'd be really surprised to find out too, how many people, just like you were saying, you grew up on the Daily Word and didn't even know that there was a church that goes with it. So just starting out, it's really more around us than we realize. But even just taking the Daily Word, I have two sisters, and they believe the traditional stuff. They're older than I am, And I have a subscription that I sent to them, the Daily Word. And one of my sisters, she doesn't start her day unless she reads the Daily Word. But when you really dissect her way of thinking, she would still be in the traditional thinking mode, but she likes having that uplifting message every day. It's like what I said. It's like, would you rather just go through your day feeling depressed and sad, or would you at least like to get a shot in the arm of something positive, and hopeful for your day? Like, let me think. Give me the shot of hope for the day, or something, a good word for the day, that at least I can hold that for as long as I can. So get some reading material. You can go to unity.org and find, a center near where you are. Find some reading material, a couple of books that really changed my life. I think that. Yes, I do. One of the books that was life-changing for me, I have a bunch of them, but that I actually talk about in print is, I'm looking around in my bookshelf. Open Your Mind to Prosperity. One of the authors is Catherine Ponder. She's easy to read, and though her message is about prosperity, it's really about changing your thinking, is what it's more about. So Catherine Ponder, Charles Fillmore, Eric Butterworth, H. Emily Cady. So there's a lot. There's a lot, but I would start with some reading material or finding a New Thought center and just attend one of their services and just kind of see, like, and maybe attend more than one, maybe attend a couple, because everyone is not exactly the same. And again, for a Black person, a lot of times in Unity, I mean, depending on the culture in that particular congregation, it may be more white. And of course, I have to say one of the big differences is in some of the Unity churches, I would say, even other New Thought churches that are have more of a white attendance, the music makes a difference, and that you'll see different in where there are more Black people within a center. Music kind of feels different, for us. So, but the teaching is the same. But Black people, we have that kind of cultural desire to have a little music be a little bit more maybe upbeat, and not just upbeat, but I will say this, Monica, because I was talking with someone, one of the groups that I'm in, and we were talking about what makes a difference for Black people in this time when within this country that many of us call our own. We're born here and raised here and raise our children here, and like, we're citizens, but in a country now that maybe wants to treat us as not even second-class citizens, but maybe third-class citizens. And we talked about, so what is it that Black people have learned over the centuries that has been the thing that has carried us through the challenges that we've been through and still continue to. And one of the things that came up in the discussion was music, how important music is for tapping into feelings of the soul, in tapping into what's at the core of our of the traumatic experiences that we've lived through. so that we could eventually heal and feel better and tap into our resilience to keep on keeping on. And that was, they talk about those old Negro spirituals. And yeah, back on the plantation, or even, back during, times of slavery when we were, when our ancestors were, and my mother, she picked cotton as a little girl. So I remember, singing while they were working. I remember when they needed to communicate with someone who they couldn't say, had to be careful of their words because it could be overheard by, their white overseers. So they would sing a message. They're just out there in the field singing, but they were actually communicating a message. So it was so music is like how we express and communicate. I remember when we took a group over to Africa, all the villages that we visited, they danced for us, they sang for us, they beat the drums for us. That was their way of saying, welcome home. We're glad you're here. It was just, the music was like, it transcended, this feeling of I'm in a foreign country, different cultural norms. But then the music happened and you were like, wow, this is where I'm supposed to be, right here, right now. Music. So anyway, that was a little side journey about music, but since that came up in a conversation that I was having lately, yeah, the music is important. And I would dare say, even in this time when we, as Black people, may be feeling, the weight of everything that's happening in our political and social environment, it's like, lean into your music. What is I think of Maya Angelou's book, I Know Why the Cage Bird Sings.
Yeah. But singing.
And I do.
Yeah.
I really do know now.
Right. Yeah.
Having looked at it that way, it's like I get that. So we can't lose that. We can't lose that. Got to keep our good music.
Yeah, well, the podcast is surrounded by music and the intro and the outro, so I know when you get to hear it, you'll be tickled at how it resonates with what you're saying. You are a religious leader to so many people, right? You're leading on boards in the parliament and within Unity. Um, you've pastored, I guess you still use the word pastored, right? You've led a church, right, for numerous years. So many people call you their teacher, I'm sure, and their mentor. But I would love to hear you share a little bit about someone who's been a mentor to you spiritually, who's had a significant impact on you.
Yeah, I would have to say, well, I'd have to start first of all with the Reverend Ruth Mosley in Unity. She is the one who founded what is now the Urban Ministerial School, and it's one of the seminary tracks for becoming a minister. And I actually teach on that particular ministerial path. There are, I want to say 4, maybe 3. I lose track. 4 ways to become a Unity minister. So one track is the urban school, and I do teach for that. But she was my first Unity minister. And I say that because my mother in her later years found Unity, and I would take her to church, to a Unity church, but I didn't like it. And I didn't consider that person my teacher, although interestingly enough, later in my life, after I was a minister, that person then became a mentor to me. Go figure, life is interesting. But my first Unity minister was Reverend Ruth Mosley. And I guess what struck me was that here's this woman in the pulpit. So I had gone to this church at the request, at the invitation, I would say, of one of my coworkers, and my life was just a total wreck. And she invited me to her church, and I finally went I wanted to shut her up. So it's like, okay, stop inviting me to your church. I'm reading your little, she used to leave the daily word on my desk every day and I would read. I was like, okay, well, yeah, that's pretty good, but whatever. So I went to her church just like, okay, I'll shut her up. I'll go to her little silly church. She'll finally leave me alone about inviting me to church and I'll be fine. So I sat there in church. I'm sitting there and I had no idea that the pastor was a woman. So I'm sitting, wow, she's a woman. Like the church where I grew up, that was not allowed. So I'm like, that's interesting. And then I kind of listened to her. I kind of like what she said. I'm like, because she was what I felt like she was speaking exactly to me. And so I sat on the back pew the first time I went, and I was like, okay, she was good. I like what she said. She was really speaking to me. And I'm like, okay, I'm gonna go back next week because she's probably not gonna be this good next week. So I came back the next week, but I sat like 2 rows up farther than what I did before. Still at the back. Okay, she's speaking directly to me. Like, wow, that's interesting. I'm gonna come back one more week and just see if she's really legit. She's really talking some good stuff. So came back, moved up a few more seats. Wow, this is the 3rd week in a row. This lady is on point. She's saying stuff that resonates. I feel it. Went back the following week and she said something. And she said, there are spiritual laws. And if you learn to live by the spiritual laws, your life will get better and better and better. And I was like, there are spiritual laws? They did not tell me about any spiritual laws when I was going to that little church I went to growing up. Mm-hmm. Spiritual laws. And she said, if I learn them, my life will get better. I showed up the following week, sitting on the 2nd pew with a notebook and pen in hand. And I sat there, I felt like I want to say, when she got to speak, okay, go lady, let's go. And I just sat there in church taking notes, just taking all that in, taking all that in. And that was really a turning point for me. So she would have to be, and then turns out years later, she is the one that started the urban school, and she was getting that going while I was attending her church. And then maybe, 20 years later, I became a minister. And then once I became a minister, about 10 years after into ministry, I was invited to be one of the instructors for her institute. So that came full circle for me. That came full circle for me. So that was, but she was my first unity minister, and she changed my life when she told me that there were some laws, and if I learned those lives, my life would get better. I'm like, now that's a conversation I need to be involved in and that I want to hear, because I needed my life to get better because it was a mess at that time. I mean, just like everything that could go wrong almost seemed to be just at that moment. I mean, that's how I felt anyway. And it spoke to me, and I started. So it definitely firstly would be Ruth Mosley. I had other teachers along the way. Johnny Coleman was more indirectly my teacher. And some unity ministers that came before me that were my teachers in seminary. One very Maurice Williams. I visited his church just as a congregant before I was even ordained. And he told me I was going to be a minister. And then he just kind of took me under his wing and hired me as his administrative assistant. taught me so much, taught me so much. Another woman who is, she's out of DC, Reverend Sylvia Sumter. She was my first communications instructor in seminary. And she was a Black woman, which was unusual at that time to see a Black teacher on staff at the school. And she was phenomenal. She was phenomenal. I thought, man, this lady is awesome. I need to learn everything I can from her. And we continue to be friends. We continue to be friends to this day. So those are just a couple, but people like that who just like touch your life, and it's like, and they're not really trying necessarily to touch your life. They're just being who they are, doing what they do, and your life gets changed because of that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And that's what I hope I do. I mean, just if somebody gets something out of what I say, it's not because I'm trying to convince them or trying to teach them anything. I'm just being and doing as I am divinely guided, and they might just get a little kernel of something out of that, and they go like, okay, that's something I can work with. My job is done.
Well, I'm certain there are many people who, some and many you may not know, who would, call your name if I asked them this question. So I so appreciate you taking some time to come and share with us about your journey and about your faith. I will make sure that people go to the show notes. They can get to your books and some of the other resources that you have mentioned. And for those who are listening, thank you for joining us for this episode. And I think this might be a two-parter. So thank you for joining us for these episodes. And I ask that you just, keep learning, keep listening, keep watching, and keep breaking the rules for how religion is supposed to work. Thank you for joining us for another episode of Diverse Devotions, Black Belief Across Boundaries. I hope today's conversation has sparked something in you, whether it's a question, a new insight, or simply a deeper understanding of the many ways Black folk engage with spirituality and religion. Remember to check out the show notes for more resources. If you've enjoyed this episode, please subscribe or follow, rate, and share to help others discover the power of diverse religious experiences. We'd love to hear from you, so leave a comment or send us a message about your thoughts and experiences at diversedevotions.com. Until next time, keep questioning, keep seeking, and keep breaking the rules of how faith is supposed to work.